Welcome to Creepy Scary Stories. Today we present to you a descent into the unknown titled Echoes of the Monolith. Lean back, turn down the lights, and enjoy the listen. The Nevada sun scorched the canyon, turning the air into a shimmering haze. Dust kicked up by the tires of the heavy Ford pickups settled on expensive equipment that had been spitting out nothing but system errors for the past 3 hours. Professor Mark Elliott powered down his tablet and wiped the sweat from his forehead. The LiDAR scanners and ground-penetrating radar, which could typically see through miles of solid rock, were useless here. Ahead of them, nestled in a crevice between the cliffs, loomed a wall that shouldn't have existed according to any law of geology. It was pitch black, not just dark but completely void of any reflection. The surface swallowed the sunlight, leaving not even the faintest shadow.
Sam, what's the thermal sensor showing?
Nothing, Mark. 0. The object's temperature is identical to the ambient environment, down to 1/100th of a degree. That's physically impossible for a mass this size sitting in direct sunlight.
The group approached the object. It was a massive structure resembling a medieval castle, yet it lacked any sign of functionality. There wasn't a single window, a slit, or the slightest hint of a door. The walls appeared to be a monolithic slab of an unknown substance that felt as smooth as polished glass, but was strangely devoid of any temperature.
There aren't any seams. I've checked every foot of the foundation. This wasn't built. It's like it grew out of the rock or was cast as a single piece.
The team set up the mobile lab. For the next 6 hours, they tested the entire arsenal of modern engineering. The diamond-tipped drill bit shattered on the first contact, leaving not so much as a scratch on the black surface. Directional ultrasound vanished into the walls without returning an echo.
Time for some radical measures. If we can't drill through it, we're trying a thermite charge.
The shaped charge was supposed to blow a 3-inch hole. When the dust cloud cleared at 4 p.m., the researchers saw the same perfectly smooth black surface. The object hadn't just withstood the impact. It hadn't even absorbed the energy. It simply ignored it. Tension among the team was rising. Sarah, the young assistant, clutched an old locket, spinning it nervously between her fingers. It was her only memory of her father, who'd gone missing 10 years ago. The thought that she was once again standing before an insurmountable wall that took away answers triggered a wave of panic and helplessness. Blinded by a sudden surge of internal pain, she took a step forward and reached out toward the monolith.
Sarah, be careful. We don't know.
The professor's words cut off. Sarah's hand didn't stop at the surface. It sank into the black material like it was thick fog. The girl leaned forward and, without making a sound, completely vanished inside the monolithic wall.
Did she just walk through it? Is that a hallucination?
David rushed to the spot where Sarah had just been and struck the wall with all his might. His fist met the cold, unyielding resistance of stone. He hit it again and again, but the wall remained solid.
Stop. It's not mechanical. Think about what she was feeling. She was at a breaking point.
The professor stepped up to the black surface. He closed his eyes, summoning his deepest professional fear, the fear of the unknown that can't be explained, of the void that swallows the meaning of his life's work. He stopped resisting the anxiety and let it wash over him. Mark took a step forward. The resistance of the material vanished. Instead of solid stone, he felt a slight chill pass through his body. A moment later, he was on the other side. Watching this, the rest of the team realized the rules of the game. This wasn't a castle in the traditional sense. It was a space where the physical state of matter depended on the psychological state of the observer. One by one, overcoming their internal resistance and facing their own demons, the researchers walked through the wall. They found themselves in a massive foyer. The light here had no visible source. It emanated uniformly from the floor and the high ceiling that was lost in the shadows hundreds of feet above. The air was sterile and still. Behind them, where the entrance should have been, was only a solid, smooth wall. The way back had ceased to exist the very moment they believed it was possible to enter. The space inside was massive, on a scale that defied common sense. From the outside, the castle looked no bigger than a boutique hotel, but the very first hall the group entered stretched on for miles. The walls shot upward at angles that made their eyes ache. Parallel lines intersected here, and the corners of the rooms seemed both sharp and obtuse at the same time, shifting depending on the vantage point. David pulled out his tactical compass and his Garmin GPS. The needle spun erratically, and the navigator's screen flickered, displaying coordinates that didn't exist on any map of Earth.
We've lost contact with the base. Navigation is dead. It's like we've dropped off the map entirely.
He turned back to check the wall they just passed through, but saw only a seamless black monolith. The moment the last team member had crossed the threshold, the passage had sealed. Touching the surface now yielded nothing but the sensation of cold stone.
There's no way out. At least not where we left it. The palace has registered our presence and changed its configuration.
Faint acoustic vibrations began to fill the emptiness of the hall. It wasn't the sound of wind or the hum of machinery. Fragments of phrases reached the researchers, sounding crystal clear. Mark heard his wife's voice, calling him from the bedroom of their Boston home 3 years ago. Sam flinched at the sound of his university mentor's stern instructions. The voices had no source. They materialized right out of the thin air around them.
You guys hear that? That's Professor Haynes. He passed away last summer.
They aren't ghosts. Sam, it's an echo. The structure is somehow pulling our memories and broadcasting them into the room.
Suddenly, a long, dark wood table, the kind typical of American suburban homes, appeared in the middle of the hall on the perfectly level surface. Glass carafes of water and plates of food appeared on it. Sam cautiously stepped up and took a sip. It looked like ordinary water, but his expression shifted instantly.
It tastes like the apple cider my granddad used to make in Vermont. Exactly like it. I can even taste the hint of cinnamon.
My water tastes like the lemonade from our old garden. The palace is giving us what we want, but in the form of what we remember. This isn't hospitality. It's an analysis.
The team pushed deeper into the hall, searching for another path. A wide opening appeared before them, leading into a labyrinth of corridors. As soon as they entered, the architecture became more aggressive. The distance between the researchers, which had been only a few feet, began to rapidly increase. The hallway stretched out like a rubber band.
Stay together. Grab hands.
But it was too late. The floor beneath their feet began to shift in different directions. Walls shot up between them, slicing the group into pieces. David tried to lunge for Sarah, but the corridor ahead of him lengthened by hundreds of yards in a matter of seconds. Within a minute, each of them was in total isolation. Their colleagues' voices faded away, replaced by the dead silence of black hallways that now belonged to each researcher alone. Sam walked down a corridor where the walls kept tightening until a white wooden door with peeling paint appeared before him. He froze. This door had no business being in the Nevada desert, any more than the smell of old pine needles and floor cleaner wafting through the cracks. He pushed it open and stepped into the living room of his childhood home in suburban Ohio. Everything was identical. the old Zenith TV broadcasting static, the frayed sofa, and the shattered vase on the floor. It was that exact vase, the reason his father had locked him in a pitch-black basement for an entire night 20 years ago. Sam backed away, but instead of the hallway, a lock clicked behind his back. The light in the room began to fade slowly, as if someone were twisting a dimmer switch.
This isn't real. It's just a reconstruction.
He tried to convince himself, but as the darkness became absolute, it started taking shape. From the corners of the room, creatures woven from dense shadow began to crawl. They had no faces, only long limbs that scraped against the hardwood floor. These things were the embodiment of his childhood terror, of what hides under the bed. One of the creatures touched his shoulder, and Sam felt a real sharp pain. His shirt tore, and a mark remained on his skin, as if left by cold steel. Meanwhile, Mark and David, who had managed to reunite in an adjacent hall, stumbled upon a pile of items that didn't fit the modern era at all. There were leather suitcases, brass compasses, and heavy journals in covers that crumbled at the touch.
Look at the markings. British Archaeological Mission, 1924.
There were no records of them in the archives. These things have been sitting here for a century, and the palace hasn't even touched their condition. It doesn't just exist forever. It keeps everyone who couldn't find a way out.
Suddenly, the space around them began to vibrate. An argument flared up between Mark and David regarding the route. Each tried to prove he was right, and with every raised voice, the walls of the hall made a sharp move inward.
We need to go back to the hall where Sarah disappeared.
That's pointless. Professor, we have to push forward, or we'll end up like these Brits. You're dragging us down with your theories.
The walls closed in so fast that the men found themselves pressed shoulder to shoulder. The air grew thin. The black stone pressed against their chests, literally forcing them into silence. The moment they stopped shouting and took heavy breaths, trying to calm down, the walls slowly receded, giving them room.
The palace reacts to our aggression. It's literally materializing the pressure we're putting on each other.
They moved on and entered a hall where the walls consisted of an infinite number of mirrors. However, the reflections didn't mimic the men's movements. David stopped in front of one. There, he saw himself not in a researcher's field gear, but in a commercial pilot's uniform, a dream he'd abandoned for the money in archaeology. Mirror David was smiling, holding the hand of the woman the real David had divorced 5 years ago.
It's what could have been.
In the neighboring mirror, Mark saw himself in a university library, surrounded by children and grandchildren, instead of being a lonely fanatic in the desert. The mirrored images began to whisper, coaxing them to stay here, in a world of realized chances. This was the most dangerous stage. The palace had begun to attack not with fear, but with regret for a lost life. Mark Elliott stood in the middle of a hall that expanded with every breath he took. As a leader, he was used to relying on numbers, objective facts, and cause-and-effect relationships. But here, logic was dead. The professor frantically tried to jot down coordinates in his notebook, but the letters on the paper shifted, morphing into unknown symbols.
There has to be an algorithm. If the space reacts to emotions, we can calculate the amplitude. Sam, give me your watch. We need to synchronize our pulses.
Professor, stop. The watches aren't moving. You're trying to measure the ocean with a Petri dish. There are no numbers here, only us.
Mark didn't listen. He began scratching diagrams into the floor that the surface erased a moment later. His face grew pale, his eyes turning glassy. When another wall shot up right in front of his nose, he started screaming at it, demanding explanations from the stone. His rational mind, once his primary tool, had become his cage. He could no longer lead the group, because he'd become part of the chaos himself. The path to the next level was blocked by a golden curtain that radiated warmth. Through it, Sam saw his living room in Ohio, but this time it was bathed in sunlight. His grandfather sat in a chair, pouring that same apple cider, and the air was filled with a peace Sam hadn't felt in decades. The voice of the palace hummed in the minds of the entire group. The entrance requires balance. For a part to move forward, a part must become the foundation.
I'm staying. I'm tired of running from what I'm missing. At least here. I'll be home.
Sam, it's an illusion. It's a brain trap.
If it feels like the truth, what's the difference? Go. I'll hold this door for you.
Sam stepped into the golden glow. The curtain instantly turned into a solid wall. But in that final second, they saw Sam sit down in the chair, the tension finally vanishing from his face for the first time. Sarah froze, pressing her palms against the wall. She no longer felt the cold of the stone. To her, the walls began to pulse in time with a heartbeat. When the surface color shifted from deep navy to a pale orange, she knew. The palace was warning them of a change in direction.
It doesn't speak in words. It speaks in states. Look at the vibration of the floor. It wants us to turn left. Not because the exit is there, but because that's where it needs us to be.
They moved on, but reality began to fray. Mark suddenly stopped, feeling not the cold floor beneath his feet, but the plush carpet of his home library. He reached out to grab a flashlight and felt the handle of his favorite porcelain teacup instead.
Am I home? Sarah, why are you standing in my living room in dirty clothes?
Mark, snap out of it. We're still in the palace. Stone all around us.
The boundary vanished. They saw the Nevada Canyon, their own bedrooms, and the infinite corridors of the castle all at once. Their minds couldn't separate the images, creating a horrific montage of past and present. In the next hall, David stumbled upon a group of bodies lying against the wall. They were dressed in the same modern North Face gear they were wearing. David leaned down and flipped one of the deceased over. His own face stared back at him, yellowed with time, with a beard that had been growing for months. On the corpse's wrist was his watch. The glass cracked at the exact minute they'd entered the castle.
It's us. But how? We just got here.
Time isn't linear in this place. We've already died here thousands of times. And each time we're just a new attempt by the palace to find the perfect answer. We're just another iteration cycle.
The corridors abruptly ended. Mark and Sarah took a step forward and found themselves in a place where the concept of architecture lost all meaning. The central room had no walls, floor, or ceiling. It was an infinite gray void filled with billions of translucent threads that pierced the space like the neurons of a giant brain. Flashes of light moved incessantly along these threads, fragments of lives, emotions, and memories.
This isn't a building. It's a processor.
Sarah walked up to one of the threads and touched it. She saw Sam's face, but not the one who had stayed in the golden room. She saw hundreds of other variations of his life. The palace wasn't just holding them, it was digesting their experience. The structure proved to be a metabiological organism for which human consciousness was fuel. It calculated every scenario of pain, joy, and fear to grow and expand its complexity.
It doesn't want to kill us. Mark! We're just data for an AI to it. It's learning to be alive through us.
Suddenly, the void around them began to thicken, taking the shape of their deepest, primal horrors. Before Mark rose a figure of himself, but entirely devoid of mind, an empty shell symbolizing his fear of dementia and the loss of his intellect. Before Sarah, an abyss of loneliness opened, where she saw herself forgotten by the entire world. The space began to vibrate, demanding resistance. The palace waited for them to start fighting, screaming, or running, feeding it a new dose of emotional energy.
Mark! Don't fight it. That's the key. The exit isn't in victory. It's in acceptance.
Sarah closed her eyes. She took a step toward her void, letting it consume her. She stopped defending herself, acknowledging that her fear was a part of who she was. At that exact moment, the darkness lost its density. Mark, watching her, lowered his hands as well. His rational resistance faded. He accepted his vulnerability before the unknown. In that same second, the infinite void flashed with a blinding white light. The entire world shuddered, but it was silent. Sarah opened her eyes. She was lying on the scorched sand of the canyon. The Nevada sun was at its zenith, in the exact same position as the moment they'd arrived. Beside her, Mark was pushing himself up, breathing heavily. David and Sam were nowhere to be found. Before them stretched an empty crevice between the rocks. The black monolith, the castle without doors, was gone as if it had never existed. There were no drill marks, no traces of explosives, only clean sand and stone.
We're out. But where are the others?
Sarah didn't answer. She looked at her hands, which could still feel the pulse of the walls. A week later, Sarah was back in her studio apartment in San Francisco. She sat in the living room, trying to return to a normal routine. She thought about how nice it would be to have another window on the eastern wall to see the bay. Sarah froze. The surface of the wallpaper began to slowly part. Without a single sound, the wall became transparent, the material shifting its structure and turning into perfect glass exactly where she had envisioned it. She realized then that the palace hadn't vanished. It was no longer a place in the desert. It had become part of her consciousness, moving into the real world with her. Now, her thoughts were the architect, and the entire world around her was a seamless black monolith waiting for new scenarios. Thank you for listening to this story. If it gave you chills, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more nightmares. Don't forget to leave a comment below to let us know what you liked or what you'd want to hear next. Your feedback helps us grow. Until next time, stay safe in the dark.